Okay. I thought we'd start, we talked about it on Wednesday, reviewing the lines. Let me see if we can set this up to where you can see it, okay? Just need to see the top, right? You can see the full board, maybe pull it down a little bit. Does that work okay for everybody?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Here. One yes and nobody else, so we're gonna see that, think that it's okay. Okay.
It's good.
Okay, thank you. Try and think of, because we talked briefly Wednesday, and I know I had a purpose of putting the lines on here, so I remembered to do that last night. But I think what we were focusing on particular, the question is, what did we say about the loud cry? Let's start by putting the waymarks on here. Go ahead and shout them out. Just for good for review for us.
Time of the end,
Time at the end, or and also
1989,
1989. And here
2001,
2001. And let's go with this one. Sunday law.
Close of probation.
Close of probation.
Second advent.
Second advent. And let's do the priests. Be 1989, right?
yes,
And you're gonna be
2001,
one. And here
14.
2014.
2019.
Your what else is this?
Sunday law.
Sunday law. Always the middle waymark. And here
2019.
2019.
2021.
Which means I got you wrong. Okay, so we know that this is 2019, right? We all understand that?
Yeah.
Okay. And so the Levites, they begin at 2001. The 2014. 2019. What does this make 2019 for Levites?
Sunday law,
Sunday law. And who are the Levites? I think we went over this Wednesday.
Yeah, SDAs,
SDAs.
all of them.
So all Adventists. That would make this 2021. This would be their close of probation. Right. Okay, so then we have the Nethinims, which is the Nethinims equal the world, right? So the question is it, as like with the Levites, are the Nethinims just the good people in the world?
It has to be like the Levi's. It's gonna be all of them.
Yeah, the Nethinims of the world. So 2021 marks for the world. Sunday law, right? So you have Sunday law, Sunday law, Sunday law, drawing that thread down. You have Sunday law. Close. What did I mess up on here? Their close of their Sunday law, that'd be their close of probation. Somebody help me make sure I got this right, because I'm putting dates and the marks, and I got that. I messed myself up somewhere. 2021. This is their close of probation. And this is second advent.
That didn't make sense to put it over there.
Second advent. Okay, so this is their close of probation. And second advent. In theory, I don't know if you, I think that's the way they still mark them, but, okay. So the question that we had, that we were looking at Wednesday, after we looked at who the Levites are. We can go by who the Levites are to know who the Nethinims are. And we saw that it is not good. The Levites weren't good Adventists. And then there's bad Adventists. But the Levites are the Adventists, those in the Adventist church. So then we saw that the Nethinims then would have to be the same, that the Nethinims, those people in the world. There are those that may come, and then there are those that won't, but they're all the world. So what we were looking at in particular, so we know this to be the loud cry, right? Let's put a couple more things up here before we go to that part. Agricultural model, we're looking at, what is this dispensation? Agricultural.
Plowing,
Plowing. And then you have
early rain,
early rain. And when is the dispensation of the early rain on this line? What is the dates, the waymarks that mark the early rain?
The Sunday law,
From when to the Sunday law? Did I miss part of that?
2001 to Sunday law.
I'm sorry, what?
2001 to Sunday
Okay.
law.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Just want to make sure. So that's the early rain, all in this history here. So that makes this the latter rain, right?
Yes,
So we're going to put loud cry here. We'll put latter rain here. So then what's left?
harvest,
Harvest. Okay, so now we have that in place. If we were to, we're not going to look at these two. We want to kind of go to this one right now. So if we follow that same pattern, the first dispensation is plowing, right? Then you have early rain. Then you have latter rain. Then you have harvest. So when's the harvest? We draw that down here. The harvest for the Nethinims is this period here. Sunday law to close probation. Everybody see that?
yes,
Okay.
Yes,
So if this is their harvest, what our question was last Wednesday was, who is the loud cry for? Because don't you have, like on the priests, we had the midnight cry or loud cry. This was close of probation. This was harvest, right? So you have your loud cry before your close of probation. So if this is harvest for the Nethinims, who's this loud cry for and latter rain for?
world,
The world is the Nethinims, right?
yes,
right.
The Nethinims' harvest is here. If their harvest is here, where had to be their loud cry?
before the close of probation.
It would have to be before, right? Their loud cry would have to be here.
Yes,
Which if you put that here, what do we see in this dispensation, this line? What do we see happening in the world? There's a word for it, Ellen White uses it, and we've been using it,
agitation,
the agitation. I don't know if that's how you would call that down here, but it's the same dispensation. All the world is seeing the agitation of the Sunday law. And this is their harvest. So if this is their harvest, they've already had their loud cry, and this is their harvest. Whose loud cry then is this?
one 144.
The 144,000. And I probably everybody has the same questions come to mind. Does that mean nobody else can come in? I don't think that it does mean that nobody else can come in. But the best that I understand functionally, this is the line of 144,000. And the priests that had their dispensation. And we saw I think it was in the reviews that we did on who are the 144,000. That was, and this came up at the camp meeting. I think with Gloria, I don't know if Gloria's with us, but Gloria's brought it up, but mentioned that I said it, but I think she actually clarified that I said it because it was a review of elder parliamenters' presentations, but that 2021 was marked in one of those studies in the Portugal as a death and resurrection, the death of the priest and a resurrection, because they're the 144,000 all the way through. But what we do see, if you look at the line of the priests, we saw a split here, right? We saw a split here, split here. So you have this whole thing as the line of 144,000. But what happens in the number of people in the 144,000?
Is there a shaking? A shaking?
The shaking, and what happens as a result of it? Do the numbers grow or get smaller?
They diminish.
They diminish.
Diminish.
So along this way, and to me, that's where you can also put in the story of Noah's Ark in a sense as well, because you have people, didn't Noah have people for those 120 years, people come along and do part of the work and then didn't get on the boat? So you have.
I have just a thought too.
Yeah. Go
I don't
ahead.
want to mess up where you are there,
No,
but
it's okay.
well, it reminds me of our camp meeting and what Elder Parmenter said. There's a shaking going on now, but people just don't leave.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
So,
the point. Yeah.
and we're not to sit and, do all this judgment of who we think is and who isn't.
Right.
We're just to sit and observe. And I don't like that word sit because we are active, but we're observing just the same.
Right.
We're observing what's going on.
Right. And we're definitely observing a lot to take in.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so not your fault, Jackie, but I lost where I was at. I always.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't want to get
Okay, so
you
I
distracted
could do
there.
that without anybody's help. Okay, so we see that this, what I wanted to point out is just that the numbers diminish, and you just using the story of Noah's Ark, there were many that came along the way and played part. And there was people all along the way that played a part in this work. Elder Parmenter even mentions, some of those people that did a good part of the work, I don't mean like a large amount, I don't mean it that way, but there were people that added components to the work that are no longer here. And he doesn't discount. To me, the emphasis was on not discounting people that just because they're not here. It doesn't have anything to do with the message that they wore at the time. I hope I worded that better than it sounded. Did you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, you made the good point.
Okay. Because you had a lot of people that brought out truths that all contributed to where we're at today. And yet they are, for whatever their reasons, not, and he gave a lot of those reasons at the camp meeting why some may not be here. So anyways, what I really wanted to show with the lines, at least, to where we can come to understand that if this is the harvest of the Nethinims that takes you through to the close of probation, the final close of probation, and they get their latter rain, which is in this agitation period, then we need to understand who this latter rain in loud cry is for. Because I think many of us have had the idea that this is a loud cry for the final the final cry for the world to get on board. If that made sense. Everybody follow that?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
go ahead. So it is the line of the 144,000 that we're looking at is all these, well, this line isn't completely passed here yet. We're still right here. So so I've been trying to review his presentations. I'm going back as well, all the way to September, and I'm starting to transcribe those in order, because for me personally, it better helps me to grasp, especially since he has been saying in the last several meetings that he's been speaking about these things since September. So we want to look at what has he been speaking about since September. And I'm not ready for all of that yet, but I wanted to pull from last week's. We're kind of behind in keeping up with him in reviewing what he's been teaching, while at the same time we're very blessed to have several camp meetings in a row with him speaking. So I'm pulling from multiple places, and feel free to jump in and chime in on some of the points that you have caught. Before, I can't remember if it was before the California camp meeting. It might have been. We were trying to work through to understand that. Let me think of the study that I got on the top of my mind. Where, I can't remember which one it was. March. It was in March. Many are called and few are found worthy. Where he was talking about, he was using democracy as an example. Somebody might have to help me with their memories as well. He was using democracy as an example, and I believe women's rights. There were three things he was putting in, and what he was doing, what I saw him doing, was he had a point to make, and he was using three different examples. While he didn't give the point, he gave the three different examples. What was he doing? If that makes sense, the way I described it.
Sorry, could you rephrase that, please?
I'll try. He tends to do, well, let's look at it this way. He's telling us that he's been telling us since September what he's now telling us plainly. But I know that we've all grappled with each of those presentations. What's he trying to say? So in that particular one in March, he's making a point without stating the point that he's making, but instead he's giving three different examples of like a story, three different stories in order for that point to be made without stating the point. So what's he doing? Storytelling. What is storytelling? Speaking in parables. Yes, Anna. He's speaking in parables. So we looked at that. That was, seems like it was a couple months ago that we looked at that. And then what he did say, and I don't remember which study it was. It might have been after California. I think it was the Eden one after California. Where, does anybody remember? Let me think about how to say this. Jesus spoke to the people how?
Parables?
In parables. How did he speak to his disciples?
Plainly when they asked?
Plainly when they asked. But sometimes, how did he speak to the disciples?
I believe also in parables.
Why?
because he wanted them to think and understand.
Right. In the way that Elder Parmenter, if I remember right, the words that he used was when they had something that they had to work out for themselves. So to how to understand how to work out for themselves. So
Right.
go ahead.
Right, he didn't, sometimes he would, just like Elder Parmenter does, many times, he doesn't give us the answers. And he allows us to work it out in our own minds and amongst each other. Jesus did the same thing with his disciples, and that's what Elder Parmenter is doing with us, which is really quite beautiful.
Exactly. So what he said last September and what he's been saying all the way through, he then said, and I'm pretty sure it was the Eden one, he was explaining now and said plainly that he's speaking in parables because there are things that we need to work out. So now he's beginning to explain some of those things more plainly. And so what are some of those things? And I took pulled a couple of things from last week's first presentation that I thought we could touch on. He says that we're in a prophetic crisis. How did he say it? A literal prophetic crisis. And we also know, and the point that he made is that in a crisis, character is revealed. And I was looking at that in forms of the fruit as well that we had from Matthew 13. Does anybody remember what the fruit is like at the Sunday law? I may not be asking that question well enough to get the answer. There's something that happens to the fruit in this history. Anybody remember?
Well, it ripens.
It
That's
ripens.
what I was thinking too.
It ripens.
Ripening.
So you have, what kind of fruit do you have here? In terms of growth, in terms of
Still immature.
immature. I almost said it. I don't know, maybe you caught it, but I almost said it. Immature fruit. How do you even spell that? Why am I wrong? Is it one M, right?
2
2 M's.
2 M's, thank you. And the fruit is going to be mature here. Okay. So you have a prophetic crisis he's talking about here, and a shaking in this agitation. So this shaking and this agitation, the agitation of the Sunday law, this shaking pertains to, in terms of what he's describing, pertains to who?
$144.
Honey.
Right,
Yeah.
the movement, right?
Mhm.
Movement. Okay. So in this crisis, the character is revealed. So I have a question. If we're going along in this movement, some struggle, I know I struggle with understanding. We struggle along the way to understand. And if we understand incorrectly, try to think back of what he said about wisdom. Somebody probably remembers that came up, I think, in California in terms of wisdom. How did he describe wisdom? Not Sophia. I know that, but how did he describe having wisdom?
Understanding.
You have understanding, and then you have wisdom. What was the step that I don't know if that's the way to say it. There was a difference that he brought out between understanding and wisdom. I don't know if Victoria's here, because I know she knew the answer to that. I don't see her.
For replicate.
To replicate, is that what you said?
Correct application?
Correct application, yes. So wisdom, if you have understanding. Then you have. Trying to think how to write this. We'll work through it. Wisdom and understanding. So if wisdom equals correct application, what happens if you have incorrect understanding?
And your application is going to be wrong.
Right. So if this is wrong, then this is going to be wrong, and this is going to involve our behavior. Correct application. The understanding that you have of the message is going to bring about, if you have correct understanding, it's going to bring about the correct application, which means your behavior is going to be according to the message. So if we have incorrect understanding, but we still keep coming along with the message and we don't understand things correctly, then whatever wisdom we might have is not going to be, we're not going to be making correct application. But I would guess you would say you wouldn't have wisdom. Does that make sense?
Yes, then our behavior will be incorrect.
The behavior will be incorrect. So if you can tie behavior being incorrect to this prophetic crisis that we're in, and at a crisis, the character is revealed, if you have wrong understanding, then the character will be revealed in the crisis. But whatever the reason, we weren't prepared for the crisis. And he does point out that there's, we're in a prophetic crisis, in a shaking, but we have two more big crises to face still. So then he brought out those that are disenfranchised, people that are disenfranchised. Does anybody remember how he defined disenfranchised?
Well, I did use the word cancel out people.
Felt canceled?
Cancel, COUNCIL, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, did he say that they believed they were canceled, felt that they were canceled? Is that what
I
you
think feeling, the feeling they were canceled out.
meant? Okay. Okay. And who is he mainly talking about? Anybody remember?
Men.
Men. Why?
I believe Elder Prime Minister said it was mainly men who felt like they were being canceled, disenfranchised, because the women were given too much power.
What's a term that the men might use?
Reverse discrimination.
Reverse discrimination. Also, what does that make them?
Victims.
Victim. They're feeling that they're victims now of reverse discrimination. You had taken us back a little bit in history. Black Lives Matters. Who has, this is going to be a broad topic, see where we're at. What was the purpose of Black Lives Matters?
purpose
Yeah, it may be the wrong question.
to gain equality?
To gain equality and yes, and so when you want to gain equality, what do you have to demonstrate? Or demonstrate.
That there is inequality?
You have to show that there's inequality, right? So does Black Lives Matter has this purpose as a movement to show that there's inequality? And what about All Lives Matter?
Well, on the surface, that sounds wonderful because all lives do matter. But it negates the whole. Well, if you say all lives matter, that you can't really see the inequality that is already there. So it negates the legitimacy of the complaint of inequality.
So if you're a member of the All Lives Matter club, what drew you to be a member of that club?
You felt disenfranchised
And what were
Yeah.
you?
and victimized.
Victimized. So you're part of All Lives Matter because the Black Lives Matter movement is crying against oppression. And before the oppression problem is corrected, or as counter to it, you have an All Lives Matter that wants to, an All Lives Matter movement that claims that the Black Lives Matter movement is victimizing us. So you fail as an All Lives Matter to recognize what? And I think Donna said it, but if you could say it again. What do you fail to see as an All Lives Matter member? Madison said All Lives Matter takes the focus away from the inequality that Black people experience. Yes.
The All Lives Matter, they're mainly predominantly white, male, and it's steeped in racism, and they feel victimized. However, it encompasses more than just the white male. It's people like the incels, or you call them incels. They've jumped on the bandwagon on there. There's a lot of different groups that have jumped on that bandwagon, predominantly white and male. What do they fail to see? They fail to see equality. They fail to see that the Black Lives Matter represents not just Black people, but all people that have been discriminated or marginalized, or they don't see that. They just see that they're being victimized. They feel that they're the ones that are being persecuted because of their skin color, maybe their whiteness. I don't know. I don't really know.
So looking at the topic of keeping the topic at racism, can racism ever be done away with by the All Lives Matter members?
Never. No, never, because it is founded on racism. Racism is the central point, the central understanding. In other words, that's the anomaly with that was that Cuban leader, what's his name? He was the leader of that,
Yes.
what's his name?
Terry.
Yeah, Terrio, right.
Yeah.
That was the anomaly with him, because everybody would say, well, no, we're not. They would say, no, we're not racist, because our leader is Mr. Cuban Terrio guy. Said he's not white. And so, but what they don't understand is Cubans are, they have that mindset because of communism in their brain, that they don't, anything that sounds like socialism is just evil incarnate. So they'll jump on the bandwagon of white supremacists or what. They'll go along with any other group that doesn't look like socialism just because of the experience they had in Cuba. I mean, it just doesn't make no sense. If you were to sit down and ask them reason, I think they would probably bump into a big dilemma as to why their reasoning is, but they really feel very strongly about that. But anyway, you can't, it's based on racism, and racism can never foster equality, never.
You can just go right in Cuba and see the same problem with the Cubans in Florida. Go right to Florida, same issue, same mindset.
Yeah, so anyway, I don't
Even both
know.
Republicans.
As far as your question about can racism ever foster equality, I think that was your question, equality. I don't think so. I personally don't think so.
So when you take the Black Lives Matter, or take it all the way back to the civil rights movement, where you're demanding your rights, what are some of the products that came out of the whole civil rights movement? It's one in particular, and I'm pretty sure it's not a civil rights movement, but eventually, one that's been dealt with in the Supreme Court recently, in the last year or so. When it comes to universities, I'm drawing a blank on the word I'm looking for that pertains to, but hope somebody can come up with it. There was a Supreme Court case, I think it was last year sometime, and they did away with, I remember what it is now, so hopefully somebody can come up with it, but they did away with something that was to help guard against racism. What was it?
Oh yeah, I forgot. Okay, in the colleges they stopped. It's that word. What is it when they gave grace to people of color, and when they, I can't. What is that word? What?
I'm thinking.
Affirmative
They
action.
threw that out. What is it called?
Affirmative action.
There you go.
Affirmative action.
Affirmative action.
That's the one that I was drawing a blank on, but it came.
Me too.
So affirmative action. So affirmative action, I remember, I'm pretty sure Elder Tess talked about it at one point in time. Affirmative action is, and she compared it with women in the gender issue. Affirmative action was to, you're going to give more rights to the oppressed group until they come to be equal. So you've got this oppressed group, and you've got this, you've made Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter. And in order to bring them out of that impression, it sometimes takes raising them above. What happens to this group when you raise them up and you start getting what you view? Let's say you're the All Lives Matter person, and you want to go to college, or you want to get your child into university. Your child doesn't get to go because a person of color is getting accepted over you, the white person. You get upset. So you've got this rising up in order to bring things into balance. And you have the same thing with gender. You have the same thing when it comes to the men that has been part of the issue for a long time. With the men, how the women are being raised up. There's more women in roles of leadership. The men are being now feeling oppressed and feeling that they're the victims. And so how can the equality get balanced? How can that equality get balanced?
Well, I,
Through equity.
There was two trying to speak, so I think Renee first and then Feller Logina.
no, Phil, you can go.
I wasn't seeing them.
I said through equity.
Through equity, through equity. So a couple other points that he made that I was thinking about as well is for the men that are feeling disenfranchised. And keeping in mind this word, understanding, because I think that's one of the keys is, do we rightly understand what is happening, what is taking place? Do we rightly understand it? Are we willing to rightly understand it? What gets in the way if we're not willing to rightly understand it? So one of the points that he makes, and he does it two different ways, but one way was that women have been victims for millennia, and then he also took it back to the beginning. You have women that have been oppressed and suffering throughout history. Now you have men, because you're trying to bring that into balance, which means there's going to be more women as leaders until we reach that place. So if there's got to be more women, this leaves men in the place. This is how I understand it. When you're going to put more women in leadership roles, and you're going to give more, I don't know the right words to, consideration, maybe empathy. I don't know all the right words that you might put there. You're going to give more attention on the women. And the men feel neglected, disenfranchised, or it's not being fair. What would be, if you're a man and you correctly understand, what would be your response to women being placed in more roles than men? What would be your behavior?
We should applaud it.
You should not just, you exercise it not in just words, but in deeds and behavior, like you're saying. Because it's easy, most men in this movement agree with that, but then their behavior or their actions are different. So there's a disconnect with what they're saying and what they do.
Good point. So that takes us back to here. Because while you say one thing, eventually it'll find you out. Right?
Right.
Correct.
Eventually it'll find you out. So then he also brings the point, why does he say, he specified, I think it was complaints, not questions. Bring your legitimate complaints. Why would he say legitimate complaints and honest questions? Think about the Sunday law issue.
Well, the Sunday law issue is,
Or the Sabbath, that's what I meant, I guess. The issue that's the question that's come up about the Sabbath. Sorry.
okay, so well, now I'm a little confused now. Why did he say legitimate? Okay, so my thought is the complaints that men have are not legitimate, and I have my own reasons, and that is for millennia, thousands of years, women have been oppressed, and so and we know, and still the women have been gaining I don't even want to say equality because women are nowhere equal to men in every field, not in jobs, not in homes, not in society. And they're trying to gain equality, but every time, and they haven't got equality because 50% of the CEOs are not women. 50% of the work, the work that's done are not men or equal, housework. They're not equally done. So women have no, they've been trying and trying and trying, but every time they gain an inch, there's a backlash. So they go back to where they started. And so for men to complain to me, is illegitimate because women have gained not even close to what men have. And so if women gain 10% of their equal rights, then there's a backlash and they lose 5 and they're back to begin. And so they're nowhere close. So any complaint that men have is legitimate.
So they have to come with legitimate complaints. I had questions there, but it needed to be complaints. And honest questions. I brought the Sabbath question, can I go to class on the Sabbath, and all that he's been laying out for that as part of that. Because what did he want to know about the Sabbath question? What did he want from, let's say it was one of us that asked that question. What did he want from us?
This will make why you're asking it, your motive for it.
Correct. Why you're asking that question. Sarah says that when Elder Parmenter raised that comment, I think you're talking about the legitimate, being legitimate questions or complaints. I realize that men feel irritated because they have had the upper hand through history, but I feel like they don't understand the depth, the level of degradation that they face because of patriarchy. I mean, women, I think you meant that, but yeah. So if you're looking at the 144,000 and you see the message, the test is gender equality, and if you have, let's say you have illegitimate questions, what are you failing to recognize? Illegitimate complaints. I think I said questions again.
Failing to recognize the inequality.
Right. So like you were saying, the number of CEOs that are women and all that, so none of that ever catches up. But as soon as women take strides to get there, what do the men do? Backlash. They try to stomp it out, which we saw back in the history back here in Reagan. If anybody remembers, we looked at that history because you had in the 60s, you had second wave feminism, and then going into the 70s and into the 80s was Reagan, right? Reagan sets up his whole administration, all of his administration by removing radical women from positions and putting, I think it's probably safe to say at this time, basically women that support patriarchy in those positions. He didn't want the radical feminists to be there. Why didn't he want radical feminists to be in positions in his administration.
Because it was a threat to the patriarchy.
Yes, he would assume that they're going to be biased. They'll bring their biases, unfair biases in.
Yes. Or the establishment, I should say. They were a threat to the establishment. And
Yeah,
the mindset of the establishment. They can't have that. It's just like in Egypt with Pharaoh, when he saw the numbers of the Israelites increasing, he got very nervous. Whenever you see a number of people increasing, what does that mean? That means that they gain more power. And because of that, when Pharaoh saw that, he had to do things to oppress them so that they would not be able to gain the power that their numbers, would allow them to. So it's kind of the same mindset, I think.
it is. You got to crush it out. You got to crush the threat. We went through those studies.
Right.
Those studies on the threat. It's a threat, and
Right.
if there's a threat, then they're going to react to the threat. And in that history, the reaction to the threat was to gut all those positions of anyone that had radical feminist ideas and put in place. Instead, you could put women in place in those positions, but women that are more like Phyllis Schlafly into those positions so that you can still protect the patriarchy. So think about the darkness that people were in and not really witnessing. I know I didn't any of that, but probably some radical feminists definitely understood what was happening. For me, I feel like I am very thankful to even be here for how blind I was to what was happening in all that history. So men would have to, I know, what should men do? What is we might have already answered it, but what would be if men understood correctly, what would be the right behavior?
Right behavior would be put more women in charge, because it's just by the mere existence of patriarchy, the power is given to men. And I believe that in order for there to be true equality, to some degree, men must feel what women are going through. Men must to have empathy. If men do not feel the oppression that the women were going through all these years, because patriarchy is on our side, as soon as we feel just a even bit comfortable, we'll backlash because we have the power to do so. So unless we're willing to go through that suffering to have a true understanding, which is empathy, there's always going to be backlash. So we need to put more women in power, and the men need to for lack of better words, suck it up.
Yeah.
And stop this backlash. Stop complaining.
And it is true, patriarchy has damaged everyone. The whole system has damaged everyone. But you're right, they have to come to that place.
And I think the only way you can truly do that as a man is to truly understand what radical feminism really stands for and what it really is, and to embrace it, and to realize that there's nothing, you can't crush the patriarchy in a nice, kindly, but mild way. It has to be completely destroyed. The male supremacy has to be completely disseminated through all social, cultural, and economic avenues in order for any kind of equality that can happen, or true egalitarian equality for all people. That patriarchy, that mindset that the radical feminists hold is the only, to me, is the only way that can happen. And so it's really hard because radical feminist mindset has a very negative and bad connotation. You like, if you tell people you're a radical feminist, I mean, automatically you're just, okay, you're just way too extreme. But in order for it to succeed, you have to really crush the patriarchy. And that's the only way that true equality, egalitarian equality, can truly happen in all society for all people. That's the only way.
I have a comment.
Yeah, go ahead, Donna.
Yeah, to what Donna was saying. We're looking, at least I'm looking at within the movement itself, because men and women make up this movement, right?
Mhm.
As we look out in the world, yes, we see this going on, this inequality and the various reasons that Donna named and spoke about. And I believe I heard Elder Parmenter say that we're about to crash on the beach. And it's all over this patriarchal system. This crash is coming, and it's going to separate. And part of this problem that he was talking about was such, just emphasizing it. We need to step forth and speak and talk about it. Because if the men are holding different feelings without wisdom and understanding, it could be on the part of the women too, learning and changing and having true wisdom. Then these things are going to come out. And what's the most healing thing? At least it's part of helping with this problem, is talking about it instead of holding feelings back. So, I underline a lot of this, of what he was speaking about. And this came from Spain on the first study. First study he gave was from Spain on this topic. And because he's delving more in, he's seeing it more and more himself even. And he's saying that this would be part of healing in individuals, in people. Men and women, we're all the same. We're all on the same, nobody's higher than anybody else. This is equality. But in order to get this healing, we need to be able to come together and share it, talk about it. Have a dialogue over misunderstandings, he said.
Yeah, and I see that as we're coming up, because I meant to write that point down too, that we're about to crash at the beach. And things are whatever's going to happen in here, this crash on the beach is very significant. And I see it as a merciful God saying, look, all this way I've led you. Review the history in which God has led us, and come now, let us reason together, which I thought was interesting on that hymn. I don't know if anybody noticed, but one of the hymns that I played, they always put a scripture at the end of it. And one of them was that scripture, come now, let us reason together. God is merciful in giving us this continuing with his mercy, because remember, this is when mercy pleads no more. And God is continuing to plead with mercy. And I think I said his, and I'm really trying to work out of that. I think I did, if I did. I've been getting a lot better about they and them, but I think I might have said it as I review in my head. God's mercy is calling for this, for us to reason together, to hear, and to understand, are men victims? Are men looking at the oppression of women for millennia, or going all the way back to the beginning? Or the honest questions, because when you crash on the beach, what's going to happen is your character is going to be revealed, even if you've been coming along and saying, you know, and Elder Permitter talks about it for healing. Jackie just brought up healing for all. Healing for all, healing for the men and women, all of us, to receive that balm, in the message, to heal us, that we be able to, because if we don't have the healing necessary, we don't have the correct understanding, we don't have the correct behavior, but we're walking and talking like we do, you get into this history, it's going to be seen. It's already being seen, and it has been being seen all along. But now's the time, as Elder Parmenter put it, referring to this history that we're in, it's final opportunity now to come together, put away the differences, and prepare for the crisis. In my mind, I don't know if I'm going to explain this the best way, but in my mind, I picture that when it came to going back to the AIDS crisis. Some of you might have watched the documentary on Netflix, and if anybody remembers the title, it's back in the back of my head somewhere. It was the series done by based on the book that Cleve Jones wrote about that history. And in that early history of the AIDS crisis, there were the various groups that were all fighting. Women were fighting for women's rights. The feminists, they were fighting for women's rights. You had the gay men fighting for their rights. You had the lesbian women fighting for their rights. And amidst all of that, in the feminist movement, some of those feminists were lesbians and afraid to even come out. So you have three different groups, just from that example. You have three different groups, and this is before you even had the trans involved. There's three different groups that are, when we rise, thank you, Logina. These three different groups that are all oppressed groups, and they're all trying to fight against their oppression. What did they have to do?
Come together.
Come together collectively. They had to come together collectively and recognize, each one had to be able to recognize that the other one was oppressed. Instead of saying, I'm oppressed, discarding you, I'm not even going to look at your oppression because woe is me, I'm oppressed. Instead, each one was able to recognize the oppression of the other, and collectively they came together. So while you have men that are now complaining that they're oppressed because of the work, as I see it, that God is trying to do to undo the curse. And they're feeling oppressed or threatened that their power is being taken away. And if power is all you know, then your defenses go up when power is being, you see the power being taken away, or you perceive and feel or think that power is being taken away. And I was thinking about this morning, and I probably shared this at some point, but not who, I don't know, but in my marriage many years ago, my husband was not that patriarchal man. But it's interesting because we've talked in the recent past that he definitely grew up under a patriarchal roof. His mom was very submissive. The man was in charge. And so when we got married, it made he admired my strength and independence, and that I didn't let people talk down, men in particular. I would stand up to men that would be sexist and talk certain ways to us. But at the same time, he didn't know how to handle it. And he wasn't a strong person. It's the best way I can think to describe it. So when it came to all the household things and, management and all that, and even the children, my being strong kind of automatically, I flowed into the role of handling everything. To put it like plainly, I guess, that to handling everything. And that's one of the things that men are facing as well, is that women have to have a job, hold down a job, plus do all the cooking, do all the cleaning, and so that's where he struggled with, okay, I get that you're strong and independent, and I really like that. I think that's great. But his patriarchal upbringing made it difficult to handle. So I didn't fight in my marriage for equality to be higher than him. I actually was higher, and I don't know how to say this other than how I vision it in my own head. And he and I've talked about it. He understands it and agrees with it. That I didn't want to be in charge. I think that men, maybe somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, men are afraid that feminists are going to take over the world and make it a matriarchal system. I know myself personally, I didn't want to be in charge. I wanted to be here. Did that make sense?
Yes,
that makes sense.
totally makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yes.
I kind of had a
That's what we desire. We desire that, to have it equal.
We
Yeah.
don't
Not one over the other. I didn't want the power.
Yeah.
know.
I just wanted it to be equal.
Yes. That's why you get married.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's like
You
it's
become one. You become one.
right.
Not one better than the other, but one together.
Or one doing everything. That's not equal.
No,
That's
it's not
right.
equal, because that is what I was doing. That was just kind of a way it.
And so, like, men, they'll say, okay, well, if you want to do that, you have your equality. Well, you just got to do it all.
Yeah.
And that's not that's a burden, and a woman can only do that for so long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then you
Well,
break
that's
down
crashing on the beach right there.
physically, emotionally, and mentally.
So how do we go about this? Because the way I understand what he's saying is he's calling them to come back. He's calling those that are feeling disenfranchised, feeling that they've been canceled, but he's not just calling those that are not in the movement currently. Who else is he calling?
think he's calling everybody.
Yeah, because I think the way he described it is that there's those that have actually left the movement, and there's those that are still here. So how do we? What do we do? How do we respond to this? Just the thought. How do we respond to this?
What's the question again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just looking at what Sarah said. Yeah, they do find it intimidating as well. And it's very difficult to because of the whole patriarchal system, it's very difficult to handle that intimidation. How do we respond to this? So there's a call. What is our role? how do we navigate through this call for those that are feeling canceled? I'm thinking of it in terms of these as well, that because he specified, bring your legitimate complaints. He wants us to have honest questions, and Phil brought it up, that and this is how I am understanding Elder Parmenter, if there are those that will have legitimate complaints, then there are also those that will have what?
Legitimate question. Non-legitimate
Yeah,
complaint.
illegitimate questions.
Or
Right?
yeah.
Or if there are those that have honest questions, then there's those that are doing what? Having
Dishonest questions.
dishonest questions. So how do we deal with this going forward?
Well, I think one of the things that he was saying is that we have to have a spirit of inclusiveness. We have to be open-minded. We have to have empathy. We have to be able to discuss and talk amongst each other to find perpetuate or foster an environment that would allow them to vocalize their difficulties and not judge them, but help them through it.
What happens if
Yes, reason together, Anna says.
yeah, reason together, what happens if their complaints remain to be illegitimate? What do we do? How do we respond to that? I'm not saying I know.
Yeah, that's difficult.
You did use one word that I think is important.
Inclusiveness?
Mhm.
Yes, yeah. And that's got to be learned. That doesn't come natural to human beings, so.
And it gets learned by hard knocks.
Yes.
It's learned by hard knocks.
Yes, and it's when you make mistake, we all make mistakes. No, none of us are perfect. And if we can embrace that making mistake and look at it as a learning lesson, and what can I learn from that mistake, or what that that mindset that I had, and without judging even ourselves, don't beat yourself up and just say, okay, I messed up, oops. And, what can I learn from that? And, when you think that way, and then other people aren't, judging you or persecuting you or whatever, I think it's, you don't get shamed or anything. I think it does foster an openness within a group. And I think it does cause a group to get closer when they do have difficulties. They share that very deep personal experience, whether it be right or wrong, and yet we have a spirit of understanding. And some of us can even share, oh yeah, I used to think that way too, and oh yes, so I think this is all learned, this is all practice kind of thing. And I think that that's I don't know, that's just the only way I think that it can happen.
So question, going back to September, a year ago September, and he keeps pointing back there. And he's saying now that he's been saying what he's saying now since September. So let's put our minds back in last September. I think how to ask this part. He's approaching, as he put it in California, the enemy in the gate, right? And then he's defining it more, and he's bringing us to understanding the men that feel disenfranchised and this call to come back. How many of us heard that in September, a year ago September?
I didn't hear it.
So it means you didn't understand it, correct?
I didn't understand it, no.
You didn't understand it. So if you didn't understand it, looking at this, what happens?
Then my eyes are open.
No, I mean, if you had the incorrect understanding, then you're gonna have the incorrect what?
Behavior. Or you're gonna,
behavior, actions, yes.
I
but
think
he,
something
but
else.
he did, he did, because he said for the past year, he's been, talking about this thing, but he only reveals, just like Christ did to his disciples. He just revealed a little bit at each time. And he's, now within these past couple of months, I mean, he's just been really giving us a lot more. So, but he's given us this whole year to try to figure it out. And only now that he's been giving us more food, that we, and at times he just has to kind of just plainly say it, like right out, because we didn't get it.
And so you're coming in this crisis and this agitation that's happening in this crisis, because what has been being said since September, we slow, dull of mind. Is that safe to say? I know it's safe to say for me.
Yes.
Dull of mind, don't understand. Now it's being said plainly, because it's being said back here so that we can correctly understand and correctly behave. But now he's saying it plainly. What is God trying to do for us?
He wants to pour out his spirit more upon us.
Yes. And it shows that we're so close. I mean, like, we're at the door, and this is a serious time, and we need to get it. This is very important, because we are so close to the great test.
So if we're back here in last September and we're not understanding, then we're not behaving correctly, right? So before we get to this point, God says, I'll speak plainly now. Why?
Sunday law is coming.
Because we're not getting it.
It's got to be plain, like with the disciples.
What has to change?
We have to change.
Yeah. What about us?
Message.
That's a
Our
given.
behavior.
Our behavior. Yes.
Behavior. So if I understand correctly, maybe somebody could help me if I'm wrong on this. Is it only to the disenfranchised, or is it to all of us that he is saying these things?
Oh, it's to all of us, I think.
And why?
All of us.
Because even though we may not say, because he doesn't know, we don't know everybody, everybody lives in different places, and we're all in our own areas. There are people that haven't vocalized their differences, and there are people that, we don't know. Well, we don't know everybody's heart. And so he's speaking to everybody, and everyone should question their own heart. Not just, oh, it's people over there, it's all the men, so all the women are good, because it's all the men. No, it's not. It's a message for each of us to search our hearts.
Yeah, thank you. And Sarah says it's hard to sometimes really get what he is saying, because he does talk in parables. Yeah. I think that's why I want to, and we've kind of been sidelined a little bit, if that's the right word, but with the camp meetings, to try to put in place what we're trying to do with some reviews on understanding parables, because I think that, and if anybody, I eventually want us to, I'm hoping that we get to that place that we do spend maybe Wednesdays on videos. I have a couple others that I need to talk to about how we're going to work that out. But so, and if we don't wind up being able to work that in, I think it's a good idea to go back to some of those presentations, because if anybody feels a little bit like I do, that I'm not as good with the methodology as I know I need to be, because if God is going to speak to us in parables, don't we need to understand? Don't we need to get to the place where it's not hard to understand?
Yes.
So I've known for a while that when he does, the Parmenter talks to us, we've known it since, for me, I remember going back all the way back to the Nature of Humanity studies, 2017, is that right, Phil? 2017?
Yes.
2017? And in the spot that I was in, I'm trying to think back, it was probably 2015 when I started to become aware of Elder Parminder and listen. And the phrase got used a lot by a lot of different people, is that he would take the long way around the mountain. How would we define that long way around the mountain now?
Parables.
Parables, right? Parables. But I mean, I would have people call me. I remember this one particular person who's not in the movement. Don't know that I could say that the person ever really even joined the movement, but he joined us at some meetings once, a long time ago, and followed Elder Jeff, and then would ask me if I could catch him up on things. And there came a point where probably many of you or all of you have felt this way at some point. How do you even explain this to anybody anymore? We've come so far, there's so much, how do you even explain it to anybody? And it became very difficult. So I saw a long time ago, he was taking that long way around the mountain, and people didn't want to listen to him. As anybody remembers, back in the day when I was sending out the DVDs of all these presentations, I would literally have people that would say, don't send me Parminder's DVDs. I only want so-and-so. And I kind of cringe. I would cringe. It's like, what could I do though? They didn't want to hear it. They weren't going to watch it. So all I could do is honor what they asked. But I knew that that was going to be, yeah, people want answers. They don't want a long way around the mountain. But if Jesus spoke to his own disciples in parables because they had something to work out, what was the benefit to the disciples? So you go through this period of time, Jesus is speaking to the disciples in parables, and they're not understanding. So therefore their behavior is wrong, right? You look at the sons of thunder. What did the sons of thunder want to do? They wanted to go out and rain fire down on people. And Jesus said, you don't know what spirit you're of, right? So what's the benefit of parables? If you look at our own lives and our own place in this movement, what is the benefit, if you were to compare and contrast, I guess, parables versus speaking to us plainly?
You get to work it out.
What happens? If you get to work it out, what happens? What's the benefit of it?
Come to a better understanding.
You come to a better or correct understanding,
Yes.
which will correct your behavior.
Ultimately, yes. If you accept it.
So I'll use, I did pass my test, by the way, 2 nights ago. I'll use that example of I'm sure that many of you can relate to this far better than I can. My education level was high school. But here I am cramming 23 chapters of information into my mind in the midst of working full time, in the midst of study and keeping up with everything else. And I'm cramming these chapters in my mind and all this information. And the information just goes in my brain and it's wherever. What's the best way to apply the information? What's the best way you're going to learn to apply the information?
You're actually using it and handling it.
So your experience, right? Step by step. And what does that say? Slowly. Yeah. So so by your experience, you're going to learn to apply it correctly. So the same thing I would think you could say in here, all this information in that long way around the mountain and speaking in parables. and maybe some of you can relate to this as well. Early on in my Bible reading days, when I was a beginner with no background whatsoever, I would read stuff and I'm like, I don't even know what that said. I don't even know what I read. And it might be a day later, a week later, might be months later. Something happens, an experience in life that now correlates to that something that I didn't understand. And it comes together. Did that make sense?
Right? And you never forget it when you experience it. It's sealed in your heart, in your mind. You can even feel how you used to feel during that experience.
You
So
used
that
a word.
is,
You used a word. What was that word you used? What does it do? You said a lot and it was all good, but there's one word in particular that I pulled from what you said.
feel? I don't know what word I
Feel,
just,
not feel, but it might rhyme with feel.
I can't even remember.
The experience that you have, that
It
it
seals,
seals
it seals it. Yep, it does. It seals it.
right?
You can read all the books you want and do all the tests and everything, but until you get that experience, and that's the reason why the parables are so important, because parables give you that experience. I mean, maybe it might not give you the experience literally, but when you read a story, or when I don't know if any of you have read books and read stories. I mean, you actually can experience whatever that writer has written just by reading the stories. And so that's what we do when we read these, parables, is we're actually experiencing it.
And I can say as well, this journey, which for me began in here somewhere, this journey, when we look at this history, when it basically turned us upside down, and now what he's basically saying is not quite turned upside down, when we went from conservative to liberal, right? So this experience where everything that we thought was right was wrong, and everything we thought was wrong was right, but we're going through this change, and we come to realize that our behavior has been based. I mean, I can look at it thousands of Walter White DVDs, thousands. I shared. I mean, I was going through 600 DVDs in a month, and that went on for a few years.
Wow.
Okay. How do you suppose I feel when I realized how damaging that was?
Ugh. Renee would he would literally buy all the sets of the DVDs of Walter White, and those were expensive. And then when I met him, when we were watching the DVDs, I go, oh, you know what? They have them all on YouTube for free.
Yeah.
and then we were, when we were moving, we came across the massive box of all the DVDs that he had bought from Walter White, and I was like, okay, well, what are we going to do with these? Do we give them to I don't know. And what'd you say?
Into the recycle bin they go. Bye.
He just tossed them.
Yeah.
Like they were. He goes, I don't want anybody listening to this.
Yeah.
And he just trashed it.
Yeah. Same here. I had to do that too. So we along this journey, we took a lot of wrong turns, but all those wrong turns that we took, what was God doing or being to us?
He was giving us an experience that we would never forget.
But also they
Yes.
were also what?
Teaching us,
No, not
preparing
teaching.
us.
That's all correct too. What were we receiving?
Truth.
No, those are all true. Those are all correct answers. In all these mistakes that we were making, what were we receiving from God? Truth, yes, to continue us on. But in the meantime, we've messed up and we're
Grace.
grace and mercy,
Yes.
right?
Always been graceful. Yes.
So what we do know is that in here, there's no mercy,
Ooh.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we don't take this final opportunity diligently seek understanding with tears
Mm.
to know whether or not our behavior is correct, because our behavior is going to be reflective of our understanding. Because God says, look, we're coming to this place.
Right. Mm.
Right?
Yep.
Question on that, if I may.
Yeah.
This period with no mercy, does that correspond when God says, let them be still cold-hearted or ignorant? Those who are ignorant, let them stay that way.
Yeah, the unjust remain unjust.
Have wisdom, let them stay that way. So that means whatever behavior you have at that period of no mercy, that's the way you're going to be.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Okay, I just wanted to make that clear, wanted to get that clear in my mind. Wow.
And that's what I might, I don't know if I understand it differently or just different points of it, because I think we can pick up different points that are being made, but that's one of the ones that I pick up from this call. But we're about to crash on the beach, as Jackie pointed out, because that he says that in the first one from last week. We're about to crash on the beach. We're going to face this huge crisis, and this crisis here is when there's no more mercy. So all this mercy that God has given to us on this journey is about to end. Anyways, that's all I have. I don't know if anybody has any comments they want to add before we maybe close. Anybody?
This was really powerful message and really something to think about, especially where we're at. And that's why I felt like Elder Parmenter, he's this eminency, about the message, and oh my goodness, it's just serious. Let me get my count.
Sorry about that. I don't know if you heard that, the phone ring.
Okay.
So I know I have been, I'm going to make a confession here, and maybe others have done this as well. But, my journey had been from reading the Bible and reading Spirit of Prophecy when I found out about Spirit of Prophecy. So as this message really, the midnight cry, began to take off, and understanding that I'm going to incorrectly read the Spirit of Prophecy and incorrectly read my Bible, fearful of incorrectly reading it and coming to wrong conclusions. I haven't been reading like I always used to. But I've noticed in myself that, and I've always kept this in the back of my mind, watching out for myself. It's like, am I going to lose that connection that I feel, that knowing God? Can I get that place of knowing God through just the message? And I have been trying to pull back and work back into my routine for quite a while, to put into that Bible reading time and not be so fearful of if I incorrectly understand it. The thing that I thought was really nice was Emma, I think we all were there, watched Emma's presentation. She confirmed things that I had been thinking about for a long time when it comes to 2 Chronicles chapter 20.
Yes.
And she left off time, what have you, or didn't go all the way through to those next few. I don't mean it as a criticism. It might come out wrong, and I don't mean it that way at all. She ended with at a certain place, and in my mind, I'm thinking about those next few verses, because that's what we've been looking at with Matthew 13 about observers. Because if anybody remembers those next few verses after verse 20, where you're going to be established, believe in the Lord your God, so shall you be established, believe in the prophets, and so shall you prosper. And then it goes on to the Levites and the priests that are now singing in harmony. Because she brought in that, and we noticed that Elder Parmenter is also going in the direction of music was part of that discussion as well. So they learned to begin to sing in harmony. And some of you were around, and this was a poorly done study long before methodology, that some of us worked through together when it came to music. And I've brought it up a few times, but when we looked at the instruments, took the definitions of the instruments, look at those instruments in the scriptures, and look at the singing in the scriptures, and it all seemed to connect singing and music to prophecy. So it's not just musical instruments playing, it's a musical message that's coming out in perfect harmony. And then the following verses after that, because they become to sing together now, they're singing in harmony. And this battle is going on. Jehoshaphat had what Emma went through was the battle that was upon them, and Jehoshaphat's prayer, right? And then, so what happens in those next verses, 21, 22, 23? Does anybody remember? So it looks like Donna might have it open. Do you want to read those verses?
I didn't write the verses out, but I wrote some of the things that she said. God's people they were united, they were harmonized, they were walking step in step with each other, exalting God in harmony. And they didn't have to lift the sword, but they just had to march in step, singing to God and
praising the beauty of holiness.
And yes, it was such a beautiful
what would be praising the beauty of holiness in context of what we understand the message to be? What is praising the beauty? What is that beauty of holiness?
Equality.
That's what I think. Equality.
Yes, that she said, you're right.
So you have to get over the disenfranchisement, right? And we also have to be ready to listen. Come now, let us reason together. So those next few verses after that, I don't have my Bible open right now, but those next few verses talk about that battle. So the battle involved Edom. It didn't say Edom. I think it might say Edom later on, or in the chapter later. I can't remember, but in the beginning, what she read, it begins with Moab and Ammon, and then other. It says other, and then the next verse, I think it clarifies the other. Or at least that's, I believe, what it's doing, and it's Mount Seir. Does anybody know what Mount Seir is? Edom, right? I believe Mount Seir is Edom. So it's Edom, Moab, and Ammon. And so when you get past verse 20 and 21, Israel was not even involved in the battle.
Right.
They saw the battle, they observed the battle, and all they saw around them was dead bodies. It makes me think, and it's been on my mind a lot because of the Matthew 13 studies that we've been reviewing as we're observers, and some of the things that Elder Parmenter said in those Portugal classes, which I know I brought up before, where he said that, and not to mean it as callous, but what do we care who wins? What do we care who wins that battle? It's not our battle. Our battle is it's their battle, and there's dead bodies. The dead bodies are there's a lot of people out there that are spiritually dead, walking dead, that are going to remain that way, and it's heartbreaking that it is as it is. And we don't have time to go into this, and I know I want to review more before I do, but and we got to close. But just a couple of points that I pulled out of, I think it's the one that we're talking about, the first one in that he did last week. Only by accepting, because somebody asked this. Somebody asked on Wednesday, I think it was, about exchange. I don't remember who it was that asked about that, the exchange that he mentioned. We have to escape the corruption of patriarchy. And it was the lusts or the desires to desire something that is corrupted. So only by accepting divinity can we escape. And he took that to Daniel 11:41, where they escaped the hand, right? Those from Edom, Moab, and Ammon, they escaped the hand. It happens under the loud cry. Now we know where the loud cry is, right? In the exchange that's happening is slavery for freedom or freedom for slavery. That's the exchange that is happening. And he talked about Peter using the same model of escaping. And the corruptions occurred by having forbidden desires or lust in us. And it's not the loud cry that creates this change. It's because of the great, precious promises made. Those are the points in the exchange that he was talking about. And there's probably more, but those are the ones that I got down quickly. But the exchange that happens. So, and when we think about Jesus coming down to us, be a human, to be a part of the humanity, a part of the human race. And then, so in exchange, we get to go up to divinity, right? So Jesus comes down to take on humanity so that we can make that exchange and rise up and take that divinity.
Right.
That divinity. I thought it was interesting that he used the word accepting divinity. Humanity and divinity together. Yeah. Well, anyways, I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that, and then we can close. Everybody? I know I still have a lot to learn. And I want to understand because I definitely want my behavior. I want my behavior to be right. And
Yes.
it is very humiliating. But you know, it's when you come to the humiliating spots that you're kind of also in a pivotal spot.
Yes.
Because I know that I, over the years, many times could beat myself up. And what I learned in each of those experiences, I could beat myself up, or I can admit and accept, which I did either way, my failures, and take hold of faith. And I know that by taking hold of faith, and that practice of taking hold of faith is what has helped me to even still be here, because I would have beaten myself up to a bad place from my failures many times. Jackie, go ahead.
I read something last night in Last Day Events, chapter 14. This is on the latter rain. I'll just take a short few minutes to read this. It says, God will employ agencies that will surprise us. And this is what Emma was saying in part of her study that she gave. And it says, let me tell you that the Lord will work in this last work in a manner very much out of the common ordinary things, or the common order of things, and in a way that will be contrary to any human planning. There will be those among us who will always want to control the work of God, to dictate even what movement shall be made when the work goes forward under the direction of the angel who joins the third angel in the message to be given to the world. Our message on equality. God will use ways, this is the paragraph, God will use ways and means by which it will be seen that he is taking the reins into his own hands. The workers will be surprised by the simple means that he will use to bring about and perfect his work of righteousness. Amen.
Amen.
So encouraging and fits exactly to where we are now.
I downloaded or grabbed a few articles that I want us to work on going forward, because he brought up inclusivity. I think Donna brought that up. And I have 2 articles to work towards that to help teach us inclusive, because it really, it comes to our language that needs to change, because the Bible and the Spirit of Prophecy are written with gender.
Yes.
Mhm.
And I'm trying to remember what presentation I was watching where it's been brought up several times. And I think looking back, I think I could say it probably went over my head, although I've naturally known, and I know Victoria before any of us else, I think, believe people before any of us knew that well, wait a second, she started to question, we can't call God he.
Right.
So we have to learn to read without that gender in there.
Right. We have to replace the he, his, him,
They,
her.
them in there, yeah.
all them. Yeah.
Jackie,
right.
I'm not picking on
There.
you. I hope you don't feel picked on, because I know I still do it. And
I do too. It's not easy.
so, but I had one passage from this study, because I was trying to look for it, and I found it, the one that I did on and I think you'll recognize it, the one that I did on music a long time ago. And this is I think it's Counsel to the Church 172.3. At the end of the harp, this is on music, at the end of the harp was an instrument to turn to set the harp or change the tunes. Their fingers did not sweep over the strings carelessly, but they touched different strings to produce different sounds. There is one angel who always leads, who first touches the harp and strikes the note, then all join in the rich, perfect music of heaven. It cannot be described. It is a melody, heavenly, divine, well, from every countenance beams the image of Jesus, shining with glory unspeakable. What does that sound like? You got a harp, and a harp, like a guitar, it has a place where you tune, right? You change the tune. You have strings on the harp, or you have strings on a guitar. What are the strings? Think prophetically, methodology.
The lines.
The lines. Mary, also the lines. I think that's probably what Phil was going to say, the lines. So you have a thing that can tune it, right? And then you have one angel that strikes the first note, and all the other angels. So you have all these different lines, or all these different strings. So you have all these different lines, and you overlay each of those lines upon another until the picture or the glory of God is completely revealed. We know that our lifeline is in the lines. So that was just one of the ones that I had in there from a long time ago. So we better close, because I know I want to be able to jump on that other study in time. So Logina, can we ask you to close in prayer?
Our hands. Dear loving God, as we've had this opportunity once again to gather, we thank you, Lord, for the information shared. And as we continue, Lord, to be in step, we ask that you give us the courage to question, to to discuss, to search, because in doing so, you reveal more and more to us. And as many today were not with us in our meeting, we pray that they are well and with themselves and their families. I want to take this time, Lord, to lift up my cousin. Her husband suffered a severe brainstem stroke. He is only in his early 70s. And Lord, you know their pain that they're going through right now, the decisions that need to be made. So draw near to them. And many, Lord, who are praying for him and their family. Lord, as we break for a few more minutes to gather our thoughts, give us energy and rejuvenation to be able to take in the information that Elder Parminder will be sharing with each and every one of us. So we thank you for this group. We thank you for this message. And we want to praise and honor you this holy Sabbath in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.